Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. Today we have with us Dr. April Elliott, who has been in the coaching space for physicians for a long time. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Welcome.
Oh, Sarah, it's so great to connect. This is the second time we tried, so this is fabulous that this is, technology. I often say to my clients when they're having challenges coming onto technology, I said, it's actually a time for us just to say, so that's how it is.
It is. I like it too. It gave us an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better, which is super good. All
That's
right.
right.
What do
Okay,
you do in
so
the world? Tell us about you.
yes. So I'm always intrigued by bios because we're sort of changing every day and trying to be the best version of ourselves and not always successful. However, I'm the mom of two almost teenage boys, 12 and 14, and they, every day I'm motivated by them and challenged by them. And I also am a farm girl. I came from a farm, and I think that's where I got my, sort of hard work, and I'm sort of motivated by challenge and achievement, and work was never done. So you had to, make a day that you went to the beach or you rest. And I'm still not very good at it. I'm like our typical high functioning physician who's type A, but I'm really trying to learn how to, pace myself, use the good qualities. Now, what did I do, or what do I do as a job? is I started adolescent medicine in Calgary 2001. I came back from a fellowship at Sick Kids, and I was really motivated to get a program going there. There was no official adolescent medicine there. And so I'm an adolescent physician. And adolescent physicians, we love complex, uncertain scenarios. That's the adolescent world. And so, with that, we use a lot of motivational interviewing. And so, I got very intrigued by coaching because coaching is really a form of motivational interviewing. And so, I've been a coach. I went to Berkeley in 2016 and I got my executive coaching, and I brought that back. I really wanted to help physicians be more sustainable. I also wanted to help my patients and their families, and I wanted to help myself.
Mhm.
Really have a better perspective. So that's a long way of telling you who I am from sort of beginning to now.
Yeah. And I like when you said I started adolescent medicine, you didn't mean I started my fellowship in. You're like, no, I started a whole program. Like, tell me about this. This was not like an easy, the path is like laid out clearly. Like that takes a lot of grit and maybe entrepreneurship or visionary skills or a whole lot of work to set up a program. Tell us about that journey.
Oh, Sarah, I got goosebumps as you were saying that. I have to say, and my parents would say it too, perseverance and passion. And I've always had so much enthusiasm, and maybe not all the skills, maybe not all the tools initially, but I'm a leaper and I get all these ideas. And so I have to go back and say, like, when I was a resident, I had Dr. Jadavi, who's an amazing infectious disease physician, and he was our program director in Calgary. And he sat down with me on, at nighttime call, and he said, Dr. Elliott, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, wow. He said, I think you should be an adolescent medicine specialist. Like, whoa, what's that? I mean, this was in the 90s, right? And so he's like, you love adolescence. I see you. And so I started thinking about it. And there were so many complex adolescents that I just was drawn to. And so one thing led to another. And I was in a fellowship at Sick Kids. And when I finished that, or as I was thinking about what I would do next, because I'm from Ontario,
Mhm.
um, I looked and I said, Calgary needs this, Alberta needs this, and I'm going to go back. So I went back and joined a just beginning eating disorder program. And I
Mm.
had the opportunity to slowly build with them and also other programs that now it's an official section that I led for 22 years and recently just did a succession planning and handed over. And each day that I was doing it initially with a little Blackberry, that's how long ago it was, a little Blackberry, and making appointments on my own and creating protocols at night. I did some night call. It's those things where when someone comes to me for mentorship and they say, like, how did you build this whole program? I just started. And it
Mhm.
was one step at a time. It's easy, someone writes a book or someone creates something to say, oh, aren't they incredible? You don't know all those micro steps and the things they went through along the way. And I had to learn fairly early to learn from those things versus taking it personally and getting upset. This was happening as you're also managing a lot of emotions in your clients or your
Mhm.
patients as well as the families. And so I was growing up with my adolescence. And I say when people say, oh, was it hard to leave as the head? I say, well, you know 21, 22, they're emancipated. It's time. So yeah, so that for me it was is if you just look back, you can say, oh yeah, but like it's those micro steps and the things you learn and the skills over time that I really appreciate having started right out of fellowship leadership courses. I took one of those original CME from the Canadian Medical Association and I kept going. And it's really important to do that. It's very important to do that to get those skills. We're expected to be leaders as physicians, but we don't necessarily get those skills. So that's a lot of thoughts. However, it's a lot of emotion and enthusiasm that comes up when I'm thinking back, and then I just start talking.
That's right. What do you think the leadership skills were that you were learning early on that were helpful when you were trying to think about developing a program?
Mhm.
Because obviously that's another amount of work that's happening outside of your day-to-day clinical work.
Yeah. So first of all, the plan. First of all, the plan. And so you really need to prioritize what you want to produce and be
Hmm.
clear about that. Um, and think about your values. I see so many people, I want to produce this because, okay, is it needed?
Hmm.
But do you value this to a place that when it gets really hard, are you going to have the perseverance? Because that's grit, really, right? Passion
Hmm.
and perseverance. And so really you have an aspiration. Is it aligning with your values? So
Hmm.
I learned that. And then really start to have some objectives and goals. And no, that's not enough.
Hmm.
What's your system? Every day when you get up, what is your system so that you can do those mini goals or mini habits to get there? Now, I'm not saying I knew that right from the beginning, but
Hmm.
those skills you start to, oh, I remember I wrote out this is my 1 year plan, this is my 5 year plan. I found those sheets probably about 15 years ago and I did those things. And when you're doing them you're like, oh, okay, I'm just writing this down, right? Because I would think I was like 30 or
Hmm.
29. Is this really going to happen? Right?
Yeah.
And it does. And so once you connect and commit to those objectives and goals and have a system, then over time, you really have to evaluate your energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me, I think to this day, is something that I really focus on. I'm a high energy person. I love people. I love being in it. I love collaborating, which you learn um, in leadership is so important. The thing is that people forget about is they forget about knowing their energy and knowing when it's time to do something and when it's time to pull back and do something that's going to revive them and restore them. And so I learned those things. Did I do them all initially? Right. I think over time, the more you read, you're like, did I really read this book before? Yeah, you read it like 3 times. Oh, now that's how it is.
Yeah.
But that's maturity as well. So those are things I think the ground was being laid and things have changed. I mean, this was 24 years ago, 23 years ago. And so we've all evolved in like from the leader's the boss to wow, servant leadership and
Mm-hmm.
being shoulder to shoulder and really the people that are going to succeed you should be right there with you making the plans. So I learned a lot, but I think there's things I had to unlearn as well.
Mm, very interesting. Now,
Yeah.
if I'm getting the timelines kind of right, we had kids happen in the middle there somewhere. Tell us about some of the changes that would have been needed to be
Mhm.
able to accommodate working and being program director and maybe then starting family. What were some of the
Mhm.
considerations that would happen to be able to make all that be possible?
Thank you for, we often as high functioning people, we kind of forget that, we
Mhm.
forget the tough parts. And so I was a synchronized figure skater. And the reason I bring this up, it's very important, is that before I had children, I joined a team and then we went to nationals, we trained 3 days a week. So I always had things and I always made sure I had things. And so, fortunately or unfortunately, when I had children, they took the role of the extra activity. Um, but it was that being torn, the mom feeling where you're never, everyone speaks about it. You never feel like you're in the right place doing enough at that time. And I would be lying if I said I had it all figured out. There were days at work where I was crying because I was missing something important at home. And there were days where I was at home where I was wondering if I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't, producing enough papers. I wasn't making enough change. But that's a me problem, right?
Mhm.
I looked at that and I said to myself, you need to know what your values are, and family's number one on my value list.
Mhm.
And then you need to then manage your energy
Mhm.
and emotions around that. And so yes, they came in, and obviously there was other things. Our family had a tragedy when my son was only 9 months old. My younger brother was passed away in an MVA. And I think for me that was a turning point in really that type A personality, driven. I needed then to say what is actually, even though you know it, what is important? What do I know is going to matter at the end of the day? And he was a very soulful, well-read individual and had all these books about mindfulness and things that he had given me in the past. And I took it to heart and I started reading those books and really understanding them, not just reading them, but understanding them, and all his little notes in the side pages. And that was a turning point for me, is that you can talk it, but until you truly do this from your heart, and then that's going to be your purpose. So it's amazing. And you bring this up, and I realized that moment was the moment where I said, this is how I'm showing up. this is my authenticity, and I'm going to be more present, more mindful. And he inspired me to do that.
Wow, what a gift from him.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
even in the midst of tragedy. I
mm-hmm.
love that little notes left by him. That's got to be a gift, like his
Oh,
words. Yeah. So,
amazing.
so amazing. And at such a timely time for you with the little person, and then refiguring out and redesigning what you're doing in your day.
Mm-hmm.
I was recently talking to a newly minted physician, and she's
Okay.
coming in all keen and eager, and she's full of all the things to help her patients in the most ideal way. And then that impact with reality of, I get 20 minutes to do this, or I get 30
Mm,
minutes to do this, and my next available appointment to see this person is in 3 months' time. And so that real abrupt kind of reality of what I have all of this capability and I have this reality. And so that ability to say, what is my priority and how can I pace myself through this? I love that you had mentioned pacing yourself, and now you've got the program director remains, adolescent medicine physician, passion with your people, little patient people remains, and now this newly minted baby comes along. And then you're in the thick of it. And then
mm-hmm.
you've said, I'm going to prioritize family and it's going to look different. Well, how did work look different? What do you,
Mm,
I mean, you don't have to necessarily go back to the first baby, but how
mm-hmm.
did work start to look different? What did you do?
Mm. Well, number one, I stepped back for at least a month from some of the most complex, uncertain situations and consults.
Mhm,
We had a youth health program where young people were very complex, and mental health and other concerns. And I just said, I am not going to be fully present for these individuals right now.
mhm,
I am happy to do these other parts if I can just take a pause on some of these. I won't I won't be it won't be a benefit to these
mm,
patients and families, and I won't be well myself. And that I had great colleagues that were able to support me in that. And so sometimes, and I say this a lot and I still have to learn it, is you teach people how to treat you. So
mhm.
teach them well.
Yes, yes,
And that moment, when I was asking, I didn't think or know that if that could be possible, because there were
yes.
weights, and yet it was, of course, right? Of
Mhm,
course we'll cover. Of course we'll do this. And so that allowed me then to be back and to be more present. And as time went on, I realized that I could, and I gained. So even though I was back after, I was going to come back after a week, and someone said, "Whoa." I came back after 2 weeks, and then I was able to continue on. But again, I think the point in that is be honest with yourself, and talk to someone, have a network, and they can help you, because in those moments of overwhelm, whatever is causing that overwhelm, it's really challenging. And I had the most amazing work spouse, which I think is very important, and Dr. Monique Jericho. She's a psychiatrist, and a lot of what came out before the executive coaching was some of this. We
mhm,
started to realize that physicians were calling us. It was about 18 years ago, like 5 years into my practice. I remember thinking, I get consults, and the individual it's almost, they're not angry at me, but
mm,
I can feel the tension on the phone and the anxiety. And I started to realize is that they're they just care so much and want to do the right thing. But adolescent issues, as I said before, are complex,
mhm,
they're uncertain,
mhm,
and they're just feeling like, I don't know how to fix
mm,
this.
mm. Yeah.
And so showing up naturally I would validate where they were feeling. How are you today?
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of the beginning. And then they would tell me, as you described that new physician, all these
Mm-hmm.
things. I have these competencies. I know how to fix things. I'm not sure how to manage all of
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really started the conversation between Dr. Jericho and I, because they're like, what do we do to stay here? How do we stay resilient?
Mm.
And from that, that's when we started doing workshops. Like we started doing workshops in 2006. I remember going to the Canadian Pediatric Society and doing a workshop. And of course, we didn't call it coaching, and we didn't call it, we wanted to call it the recipe for resilience. But then we thought,
Mm.
oh, we're going to be booed out. Everyone's going to be like, don't, like, please don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really was about how do you approach a complex, uncertain adolescent issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then in about 15 minutes, we flipped it and said, so how are you experiencing this?
Mm. Mm.
How would you approach this? And
Mm-hmm.
then we started talking about mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
We started talking about mindset. And it just was like this amazing, we started getting asked to speak different places. And even locally, we would do retreats for surgeons. We would do retreats for residency. And that was our approach. What's really complex in your role? What's really hard in your role? Let's, unpack that. And then what about you? And where are you
Mm-hmm.
at? And where's your energy? And
Mm-hmm.
so that, for us, it was like, if we can start getting people to think about that,
Mm-hmm.
then they're going to be able to step back from the overwhelm
Mm-hmm.
and, oh, okay, so that's how it is. I listened to your podcast, and I loved when you interviewed Dr. Dyke. It's Dyke
Mm-hmm.
Drummond.
Drummond, yes.
And I loved, because I agree with this, I loved when he said there's really no problems, right? What
Yes.
do you, wait, right? I love that, because we had Dr. Jericho and I have this whole theory that part of the issue of burnout is that physicians think they can fix everything.
Mm.
We think we can fix. And when we have,
Or we think it's our responsibility to
yes,
resolve the issue, like the overdrinking or the diabetic who's not improving. We take it as our responsibility that it's not getting better.
that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't distinguish, and I'm saying this because I started out this way, what is
Yes.
ours to carry and what is
Yes.
not ours to carry,
Yes. So important,
right?
you guys. So important. Are you hearing this? So good.
And I mean, going way back, I remember a psychiatrist once that, when I was doing, like, really early on, probably 2002, that came and said, it's like a bag full of things.
Mm.
Hand it back.
Hand it
I, re-
back.
I remember getting goosebumps. I was like,
Mm.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not mine to carry.
That's right. Yeah. So helpful. Love this. I love that somebody said to you, a week? What are you thinking? No, that's a no. Like, who was that? Like not necessarily their name, but
Yeah.
how is that set up? How are you guys already collaborating as a team of physicians to be able to say, I can't do the complex right now. And hey, I've had this tragedy and it just happened and I'll be back in a week. Like this takes a skill set and an amount of time. It takes something. So tell us about how you were setting that up with your colleagues and team, because I think this is important too.
Hmm. Yes, I think it really is, and it's the minutia, right? It's getting into the weeds. We can say that someone
Yeah.
supported us. So there was an amazing woman, who was in the role physician, who was in the role of the physician affairs in our department, and had just recently taken that role on and had done a coaching course. And so I met with her, and we sat down, and I remember having coffee with her and having brought my little baby, and just like trying to be very professional. And she just looked at me and she's like, "How are you?"
Mm.
And of
Mm.
course, tears and everything
Mm-hmm.
came. And then she just said, "You are not going back to work
Mm.
right now.
Yeah.
You are taking another week and then we'll talk."
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So,
So this is
yeah,
part of the university's like hierarchy, if for a better word.
in the Department of Pediatrics,
Mm-hmm.
they had recognized at that point, pretty early on, this was 2010,
Mm-hmm.
that they had that role. And she was the first one in that role. And someone I had always really respected, that, through residency, always respected. So I felt safe going to her.
Mm-hmm.
And her saying that helped me, like, we all need permission, right? We all need permission to do these things. As we go along, we realize that we actually hold the key. But yeah.
Love it. And then what about with your colleagues? So that was a day-to-day kind of remark about the complex patient. So how are you guys meeting together or talking or collaborating?
Hmm. So at that point, we had it was just Mike, because I was N of one initially, with N of one from adolescent, but I had a nurse that I worked with, and I also was collaborating with the eating disorder program, which was based out of psychiatry. But the youth health program, I had one other colleague, and he and I would meet regularly with the nurse clinician, and we every month we would meet, and we just decided. I came back. First of all, they couldn't believe that I would come back that soon.
Mm-hmm.
And we, to this day, I would say that we're friends. We're all very connected. And so they were able to just said, yeah, that's, it's the relationships. For me, that resilience, when people talk about resilience, it's relationships. It's the networks you build um, in your immediate circle. And as you go out, that when you get to these situations, then you say, hey, this, because they know what you're capable of,
Mm-hmm.
and they're able to tell you and give you permission when you're not necessarily capable of doing that. So I had very supportive colleagues.
Nice. Okay, that's important. I think that
Mm-hmm.
that ability to say we're friends, we know each other, we know the demands we're under, and or we know what's going on in each other's lives. So that's that is important, and it can be unique for some employed physicians, some physician spaces. That's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
You're a
Mm-hmm.
worker. You're not necessarily in relationship with the people that you're working with.
That's correct. Yeah. And I see and work with a lot of people that are in those situations. And so it's very important to bring up. I'm blessed that I had that unique situation. And within the I call it the machine, right? Big hospitals, big services, whatever they may be, you can create like I had the spouse, right? I had the
Yeah.
work spouse. I had all of those people had my back. And so maybe the bigger system that someone's working in might not, or might not be able to.
Hmm.
What's your
Mm.
microcosm? Like where,
Yeah.
where are those people that you have?
Yeah. Yeah, super important. Um, if we can, let's talk about adolescence, because I know
Mm.
that a lot of the people listening are family physicians or in the space of generalists or pediatricians, and they have those complex, uncertain patients that take up a lot of time and resources. How did you set up the program so that it's not all on the physician? Because if you're in the
Mm,
room and you're trying to tackle the social, the financial, the disruptive, the legal, that's going to take a lot of your time and your resources. So, what are the kind of things you've thought about that can be helpful assets or team for the physicians working in the adolescent space?
mm. Well, we could go at this in many directions, right? But I think it's important to go back to what I was speaking about, is differentiating what you can fix
Yeah.
which is very little,
Yes. Yes.
and what you can support through your presence.
Mm-hmm.
And because your time, you're
Yeah.
talking about a family physician, your
Yeah.
time is so limited.
Yes.
And so your the nurse or the person who's greeting the patient,
Mm-hmm.
have they sort of understood what if they're able to, understood what the adolescent is coming for?
Mm-hmm.
Is your staff adolescent friendly?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do they, when they come to the clinic, how are people showing up with them? So when the adolescent comes in, they're not armored up
Mm-hmm.
because they feel like someone's like, well, why are you here? Maybe it's a
Mm-hmm.
very sensitive, maybe they don't want to say to the person at the front or the nurse. And so I'm not talking about the physician right now, but
Mm-hmm.
all the way up to the physician, so that when they get in there, they're not like, oh, well, I lied to the front desk because I'm worried that I'm pregnant, or I lied at
Mm-hmm.
the front desk because I don't want my mom to
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm going to talk about. And so I think really having that set up, and there's some great papers out there
Mm-hmm.
written about how to have an adolescent friendly practice and what you have on your walls. And it's especially, pediatricians is like baby stuff, right? So how do
Mm-hmm.
you balance that in family doctors' offices? You go the whole spectrum. What things that show adults that they're invited to that space. And then I would say that know that most of the things are uncertain and complex.
Yes.
Except
Yes.
I mean, if there's a wart, you're going to take off.
That's right.
Like
Most things
said,
are uncertain and complex. That's right.
right? They are. And so how on a continuum, I think of it as a continuum, right? Where things are uncertain and complex, and you're going to show up with your presence, you're going to actively listen, you're going to identify and clarify what's going on for them. I mean, you can do this quickly with presence, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to just, or if it's something you got to intervene quickly, like somebody's having a seizure in your
Mm-hmm.
office, that's not going to be a coaching kind of a
Mm-hmm.
coaching stance. You're going to intervene. You're going to, compel them to stay on their medications,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going to recommend. So really it's about having that foundation that when someone comes, you most likely are not going to solve anything. They are going to present to you what's happening for them. And then just by listening and maybe booking another appointment because your time is tight and being
Mm-hmm.
honest with yourself, that they're going to resolve some of those things with that presence that you gave them. And I know it sounds, some people say it's not that easy. Well, no, it's not easy. If you have that framework though, that you don't have to have a writing reflex. Cats, they have the writing reflex. You drop them
Mm-hmm.
off of something and we think we do, right? Every situation we're going to have it covered, but it's the meta
Yeah.
that I'm probably in my mind, my presence and my ability to actively listen to you and validate, not universally validate, but validate appropriately, is going to be sort of half the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're not going to run and tell their parents. You're going to make sure that the confidentiality is there 100%, right? With the exceptions. And then that alone can be the solution for some.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's helpful.
Yeah,
It's so complex,
absolutely. That
right?
is
Yeah.
helpful because within the consultation, that is our higher level skill. That is our executive place to be, and that takes up so much time. So having
Mm-hmm.
your toolbox of tools of how we're going to approach and navigate some of the things that come up, really important. What about the offloading to things like social work, for instance? Did you advocate
Mm-hmm.
for a social work assistance or psychology assistance? Like, is that something that you had to negotiate or advocate for as part of the program of looking after adolescents? Or is that something that was already recognized would be required and here's your team of people? How did that go?
Oh, we're doing magical thinking, are we?
Magical thinking.
Which I often, hey, what if, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, that was one of the hills for a very long time. I'll give you the perfect scenario, and then
Yes.
I'll give you what we actually had to do. So the perfect scenario, yes, I love collaboration.
Mm,
And most of what I've learned over the last 23 years in practicing medicine is from social work, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, dietitians, nurses,
mm-hmm.
you know, they are. And so if you have the ability to have that team, if you're working in a primary care network, you know, work with people to their scope.
Mm-hmm.
And in the eating disorder program, we started just 5 people: therapist, a dietitian, a doctor, a nurse. Like
Yeah.
we were like, and as we grew, you could see how the program grew and the care that we gave people, because everybody knew their role. They would
Mm-hmm.
stretch sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and they would, I often think of it as like an accordion. I can go in and take the vitals,
Mm-hmm.
and I can do the things that I can do. I can also do a really good social history. I can also do, dip the urine if we're doing, I can do all those things. And in those moments, if you're a really tight team, you do stuff, you clean the room, you do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Now, if, but you also know that the nurses and the dietitians, everything have such great things, knowledge that you don't have to have if you have the access to it. Now, in the community, I did a lot of liaison in the community and even went into schools. And what I saw was the most incredible psychologists carrying these, like, I was like, that individual should music program,
Mm-hmm.
and you are managing this in the school,
Mm-hmm.
right? So having that mindset, when you ask me like how things are set up, I always go back to mindset,
Mm-hmm.
because if we value the skills and appreciate what people are already doing, we not only ben- see the benefit from the learning, but we
Mm-hmm.
also know where then we fit into that,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And so I had that in a couple programs, and then in others, I became a social worker. I became I took courses in CBT. I took courses in DBT.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's not always practical for people. However, sometimes that having to stretch then allows you wouldn't necessarily get those skills if you had the people there doing it. So I
Mm-hmm.
can see both sides. And if you have the ability and you can advocate for it, it's brilliant to have this amazing team. And if you don't, um, know that it's not all this is yours to carry.
Mm. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and how do you show up and make yourself better sometimes with education to manage some of these things.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that we can always add skills to ourselves, but there's only so much of us to go around. And so, where
Definitely.
possible, I know that when you set up the eating disorder program, you didn't ask for 5 physicians, right? I see that you were one of 5, and there weren't 5 physicians there. It was like, I'm one piece of this puzzle of people who can look after these important patients of ours. And I think that's something to keep reminding ourselves is, who else could help me, and what are their skill sets?
Mm,
How do I go find that skill set? How do I collaborate with them to know, what are you doing and what do you want to be doing with these patients if I send them to you? Because those conversations, I know that when I came to Canada, I walked into the Alberta Works, which is the program that helps our not working patients, or our patients who are like have no other money. It's their social services. And I walked in and I said, I need to talk to whoever is the case managers here, because I need to understand this so I can use it to its highest level for my patients. And that, I think, it's 15, 20 minutes of listening to these 2 amazing caseworkers. I'm like, oh, I get it. Now I can actually
Mm,
be useful to you. And I don't have to do some of these things anymore. I'm going to give them to you to do, which is even more fun
mm,
for me. It's going to save me a whole lot of time. And it
yeah.
was going to benefit my patients so much because I was going to get them access to services easier. I was going to be able to warm hand off what these people can do for them. So they're more likely to engage with them. And so the part of anytime I'm in a new community, that's the hardest part is who are my people? How do I find them? How do I get connected? What do they do to help my patients? And how do I now use them? And so that it wasn't necessarily people that I'd found. It's never people I
Mm.
found. It's always people who are already working out there. And I'm like, who are you? What do you do?
Yes, Sarah, that is the key. You just gave people this key, and that is exactly what when I came back to Calgary, newly minted adolescent medicine specialist, I had my black book and
Yeah.
and all I did for the first little while was go around and introduce and say, tell me about your program,
Mm-hmm.
John Howard Society,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, um, all different programs, because I started a street youth clinic as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I worked with Woods Homes for many, many years. And for me, it was really important to get out there, as you were saying, and learn about Indigenous health and learn about addiction services and all of those things. And when we would set aside twice a year a full day, and there would be a theme, youth pregnancy, go to the different places, that support youth with that are pregnant, go to all the places that Indigenous people can access health that's different from the system we
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's unbelievable the collaboration that comes out of that, because they're like, you're interested in this? It's like,
Mm.
whoa, like we're learning all the amazing things you do. We
Mm-hmm.
thought we needed to do that. And I think that is one of the fallacies that physicians, and what you talked about initially, just to bring it full circle, is that overwhelm, is that feeling that you need to know everything and
Mm-hmm.
do everything. And
Mm-hmm.
there's incredibly competent people in our community that can do a lot
Mm-hmm.
and do more than you could ever imagine. And
Mm-hmm.
so I love that you do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is essential for someone starting out. It feels like taking up time is such well spent time.
Mm.
And people know
Definitely.
you then, and they know that you're collaborative.
That's right. So if they have, I mean, the number of patients that we've been able to help because of bridges built and connections built with services around is super important. So rural, of course, I get to know all the pharmacists and all the
Mm,
social. If I choose to, I don't have to do that, but that's helpful to me and helpful to my patients and helps them feel connected and all the things. So thank you. I think this is a good conversation to help our listeners with how can I do less in the room, but actually provide more for my patients.
yeah, I
Save you
love that
time.
connection. I love that.
Yeah, super important. How do people find you if they're looking to connect with you?
Oh, well, coachapril.com is my
Yeah.
website. And if you go to coachapril.com, so just coachapril.com, and there's a place where you can, hey, send me an email and connect you. I'm also on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
and I do a few things on Instagram, but mostly I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about while we're here today?
I think just before we go, one of the things that I learned that I created really, really early on for myself when I said I wanted a recipe for resilience.
Hmm.
I was, and actually, this is kind of a cute story, is I couldn't think of an acronym. I love acronyms. So I thought, I was at CPS in Montreal. So I thought, I'm going to go get a pedicure. And as soon as I sat down and my feet were in the water, that the value you came to mind.
Hmm.
Value you. And what value you stands for is value your time as well as others,
Hmm.
A is acknowledge your humanity and vulnerability. L is listen to your body. So be self-aware. Like, when do you have to go to the bathroom? Are you taking your vacations? When's the last time you ate? And then understand your work based on your values, which might be different than the culture or system that you work in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important.
E is evaluate your work based on the outcome and the process. For me, process, get your process and your system down. You don't know if you got that outcome by surprise, right? Everyone's outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. I heard that all the time. I'm like, well, what's the process? Get a good process, get a good system. And U is utilize those self-regulation skills. So for me, that's mindfulness. That's being aware of my mindset. And then also understanding mind sight, which is Daniel Siegel's work. And like, can I understand what another person might be thinking at this time so that I can then work with them better, not based on what I think is going on, but what might be going on for them. And so I want to leave with that value you is really about resilience for yourself in complex, uncertain times and systems that we're part of, right?
Yeah.
We're part of that.
Yeah. We can't solve it, that's for sure.
Right? So teach people how to treat you.
Yeah. Love this conversation, April. Thank you so much for your time today. I think people are going to love this and all the skills that you have taught them today. Bye.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the Premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.